Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Abraham, and I'm the founder of Accepted and the moderator for today's Q&A. Welcome to med school interviews during COVID-19. This is going to be a Q&A with expert Dr. Herman Gordon, Dr. Barry Rothman, med school's admissions and interview experts, and Accepted's medical school admissions consultants will be responding to your questions. I'm going to tell you more about their background and qualifications in just a second. But now, a couple of pieces of information before we get into the Q&A. We may ask questions of you. The questions can go both ways, and ask you to raise your hands in response. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon on your Zoom control panel, in case anybody doesn't know how to do that. I feel like whenever I say that, I feel like the people telling you how to fasten a seatbelt on an airplane. But in any case, for most of you, it's at the bottom of your screen. Please raise your hand if acceptance to medical school is the next step on the road to your dream career, becoming a physician. So again, please raise your hand if becoming a physician is the next step for you. Okay. I'm pleased to see that most of you are here for the right reason and know how to use Zoom. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, everybody. Put your hands down. And then to ask your questions, I'm going to ask you to post them in the question window, not in the chat window. Okay, because it's much easier for me to go through them if they're all in the question window. When you leave, you're going to receive a brief survey. Please fill it out. We value your feedback. And the next item is the applicant's favorite. I'm not using any slides this time, so I'll repeat it, but we have a special offer, $100 off a gold mock interview package. The coupon code is ACE the MMI, or it's ACE the MMI, but it could be any interview. Here's the coupon code. It expires September 15th. And here is the page where you can purchase it. Just one second.
And ACMMI is all
actually, no, sorry,
capitals.
I got the wrong coupon code. It's Get Accepted. Sorry about that. Here you go. Okay, so there is, again, here you go for the coupon code and where you can take advantage of it. Now, let's pose a couple of questions before we start. First of all, in the chat window, since that's going to be for your answers to our questions, where are you located? City and state in the United States, city and country if you're outside the United States. Again, where are you located? New Orleans. Is it raining there? Were you hit by the hurricane? North Carolina, Washington, D.C., San Jose. They got probably a lot of smoke like we have. Just a bit. Okay, so not bad. Cincinnati, Ohio, Fort Worth, Texas, Michigan, Iowa. My husband went to school there. San Francisco, Los Angeles, a neighbor. Okay. All over the country. Wonderful. Anybody from outside the United States here? No, I don't think so. All right. Next question is actually a poll. So give me a second to get to it. And here you go. How many of you have been invited to a medical school interview so far this cycle? And the options are yes, MMI, yes, traditional, yes, Vita. I have not received any interview invitations yet. Okay. And you can answer more than one. Again, the options are yes, MMI, yes, traditional, yes, Vita. And I have not received any interview invitations yet. We're at 76 of you have voted. Let's see if we can't get it up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're going to do it. 76%. Here's going to end the poll. And here are the results. One of you have been invited to an MMI. 4% of you have been invited to an MMI, 23% to a traditional interview, 12% to Vita, and 69% have not yet received interview invitations. I'm not surprised for this year, and we've timed this webinar so that it will have maximum value to those going forward. I think that in general, the schools are sending out the interview invitations a little bit later. Okay, right? Okay, and then let's go to the next poll. Okay. How many of you are nervous about your medical school interviews? And the options are nervous about the MMI, nervous about the traditional interview, nervous about Vita, not nervous, at least not very nervous. And again, you can apply to multiple answers here. All right. And again, 75% having voted. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the polling. And 57% are nervous about an MMI. 57% are nervous about a traditional interview. 46% are nervous about Vita. And 18% are not too very nervous. That's good. Congratulations. I think being nervous is normal, but it's probably better if you're not too nervous. MMI, Vita, traditional interview, they're all possible this year. And for better or worse, wait, let me just share those results with you. They're all remote, no in-person contact at all. However, that doesn't make them any less nerve-wracking. The solution, or at least a partial way to ease your anxiety, are another 2 letters, and that's the ones that are Q and A, questions and answers. And whom are you asking? To med school admissions expert. I'm thrilled to have on this webinar Dr. Herman Gordon, also known as Flash Gordon, and Dr. Barry Rothman. Dr. Gordon earned his bachelor's in biochemistry from Harvard and his PhD in developmental neuroscience from Caltech. He has been an associate professor at the University of Arizona Medical School, and while there also served as a member of, and then for 2 years as chairperson of the admissions committee. The University of Arizona Medical School was one of the first to start using the MMI. Dr. Barry Rothman earned his bachelor's from Haverford College and then went to Caltech for his doctorate in biochemistry. Since 1986, he has been a professor of biology at San Francisco State, and for 19 years, he was SFSU's Health Professions Advisor and also founded several post-bac programs. His students in these programs had an 80% acceptance rate. He has years of experience preparing medical school applicants for all kinds of interviews. So here's what we're planning for the next 50 minutes or so. I prepared several questions for Dr. Gordon and Dr. Rothman, and I'm going to start with some of those. But we all would love it if you post your questions, again, in the question window, and I'll ask as many as I can. We're also going to do a Q&A for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to ask for a volunteer who will do a micro mock interview with Dr. Gordon, and Dr. Rothman will provide feedback when done, okay? So then we'll return again and finish up with the Q&A. During the Q&A portion of the AMA, I might ask some of you if you want to speak your questions, and then that'll allow for a little bit of dialogue, but it also takes a little bit more time, so we'll see how many questions we get and how much time there is for that. And again, that way they can also ask follow-up questions. And you may post your questions at any time in the question window. Somebody, an anonymous attendee, has asked, will this be recorded? Yes, it is being recorded. I just double checked, and the link will be sent to you. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the results, and I get to post the first question, but I want to again encourage you to post your questions in the question window. So the first question is, can you briefly provide an overview of the different kinds of med school interviews? Dr. Rothman, why don't you start with that?
Yes. So there's the standard medical school interview in which you sit down with, of course, this is all virtual now. You sit down with one person, sometimes 2 people, and they ask you some questions. On the internet, you can find many, many interview questions, standard interview questions. As an example, why do you want to be a physician? What are your best and worst qualities? A new question would be, what have you done during the COVID pandemic? So that's a standard interview. An MMI is an interview where you have maybe 7 to 10 stations, each station lasting about 10 minutes. And during those stations, you can have a number of activities. They can be cooperative activities with another person. It could be something like a debate where it's more adversarial. It could be a role play, or it could be a standard interview question, including a question about ethics. So MMIs tend to be more lively and I think probe your personality and your style more than a standard interview. And then there's the Vita, something that AMCAS has come up with recently to try to help med schools with the interview process. And in the Vita, you first have to be invited to give one. And the first med school that invites you determines the questions that you are asked. And I believe it's 5 or 6 questions, and you have something like 3 minutes to answer each. And there's no practicing during the Vita. You're stuck with having to answer one question after the other for 3 minutes. And then that's recorded and it goes to the first med school, and other med schools can request access to your Vita, probably with your permission. So those are the three kinds of interviews. The Vita, in my opinion, is somewhat like the Casper, but a video version of the Casper. And some schools will use the Vita as a screening tool and then also have one or both of the other kinds of interviews.
Okay. Dr. Gordon, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's a great summary. I had a client I was speaking with today who was told that they had to submit the Vita in order for their application to proceed forward. And then 6 hours after they clicked the Vita button, they got an interview invite. So,
Oh, wonderful.
so he was a little suspicious that they had even looked at the Vita.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We are having questions come in, and I'm going to turn to them in just a second, but I do want to ask one question before we turn to our visitors' questions, our guest questions, and that is, what is the admissions committee actually evaluating in these interviews? Dr. Gordon, you want to start with that one?
So I'd say the most important thing in an interview is to determine whether the person who you're talking to is the same as the person that was in the written application. Right? So, and that's part of the overall effort of the admissions committee to determine that the application makes sense as a whole. Like, all the pieces fit together and they've got a true sense of who this person is. So that's number one, right? And so in a sense that tests whether or not somebody else wrote the application, and all kinds of issues that could come up. Another aspect of it is to weed out the jerks. And so this is probably, I hate to say it, the most important reason for med schools to have interviews. If you have one or two bad apples in a class, it just destroys the experience for everybody. And it's worth it to find those bad apples and make sure that they're not coming to your med school. And I can give stories of bad apples and what it does for a class. And I've also met them in interview sessions and have been able to weed them out. Okay, so once you get past them, and they're not very frequent, but they're very important, then you're dealing with real people who are valid applicants who you want to consider. And for that, I'd say, there are some people who are outstanding interviewers. And it may be because they were in a profession that deals very well with people. But that's not necessarily everything that goes into being a doctor. So I think part of what they're looking for in the interview is, are you a thoughtful, reflective person? Can you communicate effectively? They're trying to visualize you as someone who's going to interact with their classmates, who's going to interact with the faculty, who's going to interact with future patients. It's like, are you the kind of person who could be a doctor, right? So it's a very general impression that they're trying to make. And then after that, they're going to be scoring specific interview questions. And yeah, those will be taken into those scores will be part of the overall consideration. But what's most important is the interviewer's impressions and the actual sentences that they write down in their evaluation that go back to the admissions committee.
Okay, great. Dr. Rothman, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think they also want to like you. So it's not an adversarial process. Med schools want to have good people in their class, and they want to give you a chance to shine. So they're not looking to make it difficult for you. In fact, the best interviews are ones that are conducted where the person's relaxed and is being themselves. So I think a lot of interviewers will do things to promote that. For example, ask you some easy questions at the beginning. You know, what do you do for fun when you're not studying for the MCAT or something like that? And so the more relaxed you are and the more real you and authentic you can be, then the better the interview and the better, more accurate sense they have of who you are.
Okay. And I think your comments actually lead directly to the next question, which is from Abby. And Abby asks, any tips for dealing with nerves going into the interview? Okay, go for it.
Okay.
you look very anxious to answer that one.
Yes. Well, what I like to do is, before something that's making me feel scared or nervous, is do things that keep me in my body. So doing aerobic exercise, I'm a yoga fan, so I would do yoga or breathing exercises. You can even do breathing while you're interviewing. Just take a deep breath. I wouldn't make those sounds, but it's a way of relaxing yourself. So getting good at relaxing and learning how to take care of yourself is good for interviewing, but it's also good for your career. You're in a stressful career if you're a physician, and you have to learn how to handle the stress. This is a great time to learn how to handle it.
It's true. Dr. Gordon, anything to add?
I think be prepared for it. So, you know, imagine yourself flubbing. Right? You go in, it's like, You know, I can't answer the question. So what are you going to do or say when that happens? And I think you should be honest. You can say, you know, look, I'm really nervous. I really want to come to this med school. And then you're bringing the interviewer onto your side, right? So, you know, you've been honest and, you know, and hopefully the interviewer will say, well, you know, this is not adversarial, right? Where the purpose of this is to get to know you. And then they'll kind of relax you and give you some softball questions. But I think that's the best approach, is just say, I'm sorry, I'm really nervous, and then move on from there.
And maybe also, I think what you said, Dr. Rothman, that this is, both of you said actually, this is not adversarial. This is not supposed to be I guess this is somewhat of an evaluation, but it's not supposed to be adversarial or unpleasant.
It's not a grill. They're not
exactly
there to grill you. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. We also have a question here. Thank you both. We have a question here from Danielle, who asks, how should one answer why blank School of Medicine? Should we highlight curriculum, school vibe, city the school is located in, etc., or whatever? Tell you what, Dr. Gordon, why don't you start that one?
Okay. So it's all about fit, right? So the school wants to accept future students who are going to accept them back. And so they want to know why they're a good school for you when they ask a question like that. So you should know in depth what they have on offer, special programs, special opportunities. Maybe you know, the school does a lot of outreach, like Tulane, and so they're really into community medicine, and that's something that you've done a lot of and want to do more of. Well, that's something that you would highlight. I think another important thing is that you will be comfortable at that school. For instance, the New York schools often ask people about how they're going to respond to living in New York City. So if somebody's not so comfortable in a big city, especially New York City, that's going to indicate a not so great fit. Another aspect of that, of the setting, is whether you have some sort of support structure there. So do you have family there? You know, is there a personal reason for you to be in that location? That's a really valid part of your answer and will support the sense of fit on the part, you know, that you're communicating to the school. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dr. Rothman, anything to add?
Yes, one thing you can do, often at the end of an interview, they'll ask you, do you have any questions? And so you can reiterate your interest in the school by asking questions that are not just taken right off their website, but actually show that you're thinking about their school and how they might be supportive of medical students, and maybe even ask the person interviewing you what they think the strengths of their school are, or how they like being there and how long they've been there. Something that shows that you've really thought about the school, and that conveys your interest.
You're actually answering another question that's in the question window right now. So, and that is, what types of questions do you recommend for asking the interviewer for traditional interviews specifically? So do you have go on, add some more to that, or?
I really look for special programs. What are the things that make that med school unique?
And attractive.
And yes, and attractive. And then, point out that how you might fit with that. Many schools now have urban outreach programs and outreach to special communities. And they have many, many special programs. Just as an example, the University of California med schools have prime programs, an entire curriculum devoted to underserved communities, where each campus specializes in a particular underserved community. So asking about those and showing interest in those are going to look good.
Okay, great. Dr. Gordon, anything to add to good questions to ask?
I like to ask them how the faculty support the students.
Okay.
And so some of the faculty that you're interviewing with may not actually know about all the programs in the med school.
True.
And that may be the answer they give you. It's like, well, I don't know about that program. But hopefully they're interacting with the students, and it'd be nice to get their perspective on it. I think it varies a lot from school to school. So that's something, as an applicant, I would take into whether or not I would want to go to that school. So.
Okay, great. Ashley asks, how would you allow your personality to shine through in a Vita interview where there is no real-time feedback from an interviewer? There's no feedback period from an interviewer. Okay. So Dr. Gordon, I think Dr. Rothman started last time, so I'm going to start with Dr. Gordon now. Okay.
Yeah, actually, I just reviewed a client's video responses that a med school had asked her to provide that were outside the Vita system. And I thought, she was very natural. I think if you're used to posting in social media in a video format, I don't think you'll have any problem. If you're not used to that, I think just, imagine that you're talking to somebody on the other side, and, and just go for it.
Okay. And Dr. Rothman, you have anything to add?
Yes, practice, practice, practice. Some of us are not used to speaking to a blank screen or in an empty room, but you can actually get good at it. And so the more you practice and you're comfortable with it, then the more your real self will show. And I would say, record your videos, your practice videos, and show them to people who can give you feedback. It could be subtle things like the way you're holding your body, or half of your head is cut off in the video frame. The framing is important. Your tone, whether they can hear you or not. There's a lot of details. And it wouldn't be a good idea to go into a Vita cold without having practiced many times. And yes, I've had a client work with me, and she recorded 6 Vita interviews in a row for practice. And I got to review them without talking to her, just watching the Vita interviews. And she had practiced quite a number of times. And by the time she got to this practice Vita, she was great. It was very impressive.
Right. Practice makes perfect. There's no question. I know I've told you both about a time a young woman called me up asking, why should I get interview prep from your company? And I asked her, do you play sports? Do you play an instrument? Anything? She says, yes, I used to play piano. And I said, would you consider doing a performance without having a dress rehearsal, without rehearsing? She says, no. I said, well, why would you do this? And she bought. she decided it was worth her while because it's important. When it's important, practice. It's not only that practice makes perfect. It is vital, and sometimes getting feedback can also be vital. Now we got lots of questions coming in, and we are in about 4 minutes. After this question, we're going to stop and do the mock mini interview. Okay. So anybody, if you are interested in doing that, please raise your hand and I'll pick somebody. In the meantime, the next question is, what can you do well, actually, I'm going to do this one a little bit later. How would you allow your personality to shine through in a Vita interview? Oh, that's the one I just did. Sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. I know there's a good one here. How should we prepare for a school-specific video interview where we should answer questions for only 1 minute and 30 seconds? I feel like that's not enough time to structure my answers to their questions. Okay, Dr. Rothman, go for it.
Yes, well, again, practice, practice, practice. Whenever I help anyone practice, I always say, get the most important information in first, because you may get cut off before you get to the part that you've delayed. So I would say, think about the most important information you want them to know about you and try to get it in that minute and a half. And you might think about that in terms of the entire interview. What do you want them to come away knowing about you? And to have those bulleted points in your mind and to make sure that you touch on those as much as possible during all of the interviews.
Okay, great advice. Dr. Gordon, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Rothman. So 1.5 minutes is a 1 bullet point answer. So think about that before you structure your answer.
Right. It might be more than one, but you have to be very well organized to do it. No question. And you do have to have a sense of priorities. It's kind of like when you're writing your essays and you have to think, what are your most important activities? What do you really want them to know?
Right, and you have 300 characters to describe it in.
Yeah, right. To compress your 20 years plus years, right? Okay. All right, so who wants to, all right, we have Shivani. I think I'm gonna unmute you now. And you are still muted, so you can, oh no, actually.
Can we do a video?
Do you wanna turn the video on, Shivani? Or can you?
Sure, I don't mind.
Okay, yeah. Please do.
How...
I might have to give you permission.
Yeah,
That's part of what's
going
on. Okay, hold on. I'll do it. Just give me 1 second.
Okay, thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Bye.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Hi, thanks for volunteering.
Just 1 second. Yeah.
Very brave, Shivani.
We'll be very nice, I promise.
I want to learn from this experience.
Good. That's a great attitude. Now, why don't I see you on the list of participants? I know you're there. Oh, no, wait. That is just really weird. All right, we might just have to do it with talking only because I'm having some issues here. If I can figure out how to get the video on, we'll do it. And otherwise, just have to do it this way. All right.
All right.
Dr. Gordon, you're the interviewer.
I wonder if you can promote her to panelist.
That's what I'm trying to do, and it's not letting me.
No. Uh-oh.
You there? Shivani,
She disappeared.
Oh, there she is. Oh, there
she's back.
Hi, Shivani.
You there? I don't hear you now. Okay, now we hear you. Okay.
Hello. It said my video has been stopped by the host.
Okay. So when we work with clients to practice these, we always do them using some sort of video platform. So I end up using FaceTime a lot with clients. But it's, and then also Zoom. There are other platforms. If you know which one's being used by the school in advance, then I would try to use that platform just so you're comfortable with it. So Shivani, is there like a particular question that you're concerned about?
So I've been invited to a video interview. I was the one who had the question about the 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, if you just had any advice on that or any way to prepare me, I'm new to all of this and it's my first time in this application cycle. I'm hopeful, but also scared.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Does sound
So,
self-aware.
right. So this is one where they, you have to record it and submit it back to them.
Yeah.
And they've already given you like 6 questions.
I haven't seen the questions. I will see them when I start the interview, and it automatically starts timing as soon as I see the questions.
Oh, okay. I'm going to look at the client I just did in this format and
Okay,
pick
thank
out
you.
one of her questions. And it was the same thing, it's a minute and a half, which is shorter than the Vita ones. And then I'll give you a piece of advice that I gave my client, which is
Okay.
put your phone up so that it's at eye level, right? Because
All right.
you want them to think that you're talking straight to them. Right?
Okay.
I think there's a real tendency to, have the your phone down on your desk and it's looking up at you. Try as much as possible to make it seem like there's a person on the other side and you're talking to them. Okay, so here's one that's a minute and a half. So it's what is an important issue in medicine and why?
Okay. So I think that an important issue in medicine is our cultural bias against patients of color. And I think that we need to collectively recognize our bias on an individualistic level and work with patients and understand their different backgrounds. I personally am able to speak 5 different languages, and I want to use this to translate the background that I have had to the patients that I will face and help them in the best possible way that I can. I've been reading various books and I've been taking a class on social stratification, and I think that this impacts our healthcare as well. I've understood the various difficulties that people of different classes, different genders, and different members of society experience, and we need to give different healthcare to these patients with understanding where they come from. I'm not sure how long that was. Should I continue? I don't mind continuing.
I think you've got about 25 more seconds. So I'll
Okay,
give you that.
I will also work on this by understanding more about social stratification in our healthcare as well. I have read several research papers, and there are various rules and guidelines that we can enforce in healthcare. And I would like to thank you for your time. I didn't know how to end it.
Yeah, okay. So that's about the right amount of time. And Dr. Rothman is going to give you feedback.
Okay,
This
thank you.
this particular format is unusual because with a minute and a half, I basically have to give you the question, and you just go, right? There's,
Yeah.
a lot of the interviews are going to be more dynamic and conversational.
Right.
But I'll turn it over to Dr. Rothman now.
Hi, Shivani. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling okay. I felt like I had a lot more to say. I mean, I've lived in Kenya and I can compare the healthcare systems in rural regions of Kenya, and also I've also lived in Florida and California, but I forgot to mention all of that because I was worried about the time and I had more time.
Uh-huh.
So I'm feeling a little annoyed at myself.
Uh-huh.
I don't
Okay.
want this to happen.
Well, don't beat yourself up. I think you did quite well. You had made many good points. I mean, you started right out with, cultural bias being an important issue in delivering healthcare. Right on. I mean, that is creating huge problems and has created huge problems in the healthcare system. You then went on to talk about your cultural competence by saying that you know 5 languages. Wow, 5 languages. What are they?
So I can speak English, French, Gujarati, Kiswahili, and Hindi. I'm also learning Spanish slowly, but I studied Latin, so it helps me understand the rest and helps me understand the grammatical rules better.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, great. Good for you. Good for you.
Thank you.
And then you also talked about taking a class and reading books on social stratification. I mean, you had great information. Okay. I think there's a couple things you need to do to make it perfect. So your content was great. I mean, you did run out of steam at the end.
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize.
Okay.
I'd probably run out of steam at the end of it too. But I thought
That's why you practice.
I thought you spoke too quickly. And so you didn't come up for air. And so,
Right.
one thing that's kind of an amazing thing to think about is when you pause, it tells the person that the thing that follows is important. And so an endless stream of words can be tedious to the listener. And I know you're nervous and you want to get it all in a minute and a half, but if you could slow down a little bit and punctuate it a little bit with a very brief pause, half a second, like that, then it really makes a difference. And then I think you had thought about this so much that it almost sounded scripted, that it almost sounded like you were reading it. And so I would say, instead of trying to remember it word for word, try to remember the bullet points. Now, I don't know what your experience was, but I'm just telling you what it sounded like. If you remember the bullet points, the main idea is that every time you give the answer, it's a little different and it doesn't sound scripted.
You're right. I had worked on this for a secondary application for one of the universities, and that was one of the questions, so it just quickly came to mind. But I see what you mean.
Yeah. Try to have bullet points. I think those really work well because, not only do you have bullet points for a number of different interview questions, but you wind up with a repertoire of bullet points that you can use for surprise interview questions.
True. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Gordon,
you so
Dr.
much.
Rothman, and Shivani. Appreciate your being the volunteer here. And I hope you did learn something.
Thanks,
I
Shivani.
learned a lot.
Great. Okay.
I'd like to follow up to
Go
Dr.
ahead. Go ahead.
To his bullet points. I've noticed when I have interviewed applicants that there's the occasional applicant who gives me the answer right away, so he gives me a one-sentence answer, and then he says, and this is because, and then he counts them off on his fingers, and then he goes through and explains each one in turn. And I love it. It's just so great to know what's going to come. And also it allows me as an interviewer to focus on some of the things that he wants to talk about. So maybe I'd like him to expand more on the second point. Well, because he's put that out in front, then it makes it very easy for me to follow up on it. But
I understand what you mean.
But everybody who's used that bullet point format, and I think the counting on the fingers really helps.
You don't have to show your fingers, by the way.
But what if it's a question that I haven't prepared for? Like, what if I have to think about what I'm saying as I go? Is that, can you tell, and is that bad?
It's okay to take.
Thinking is generally a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah, sort of, stop, think a little bit, and then say, well, here's my answer, and here's why, right?
Yeah.
There's always going to be some questions that you're not prepared for, not you haven't practiced. You may be prepared for them, but you haven't practiced. One other thing that Uh, in terms of pausing, if you wait 1 second after the question is delivered and then give your answer, it's much more palatable than somebody who, like 1 millisecond after I finished the question, they already have an answer. I know it's subtle, but it really makes a difference in terms of it makes it seems like you're thinking about things and it's not just something you've memorized.
Okay.
Right, yeah. I will try to do that and keep all of these facts in mind. Thank you so much.
You're very
welcome.
I
welcome.
appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Shivani. Okay, I muted Shivani again, and I'm going to go back to the questions here. Thank you, Dr. Rothman. Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Raise your hand if you found that exercise valuable, please. Yeah, pretty popular. Okay, you can keep raising your hands. It's okay. But we got the idea. Thank you very much. Good. Okay, wonderful. So here we have a question. This is a really easy one from Melba. Do you look into the camera or screen? You look at the camera. You want to ideally, as Dr. Gordon said earlier, be at the level of the camera, have your eyes be able to look right at the camera. Okay, let's go back to some of the other questions. Here's one from Sydney. What are the answers to avoid if asked why you want to be a doctor? Dr. Gordon, you want to start with that one?
So what would be a bad answer?
Why you're a doctor? Yeah, that's the
There are
question.
probably lots of bad ansers. Some that I've heard are
I want to help people.
lifestyle choice, right? I like the lifestyle of a doctor. I don't think so. Right? So what that says is, oh, I like making a lot of money, right? And I think if you really thought about being, the lifestyle of a doctor, it's like, it's pretty rough, it's a lot of time, and especially now with COVID, I mean, it's a noble life. So I think that's more of a good answer is, I want to be part of helping. But yeah, bad answers are where the professional choice is about me and what I'm going to get out of it. So it should be what you're going to give to others. So.
Okay. Dr. Rothman?
Yes, here's a bad one. Gee, what an interesting question. I never thought about that. So obviously, that's a question you're going to get asked almost certainly. Certainly, if you get several interviews, you're going to be asked that. And so you might as well be thinking about it. And then another bad answer is, I really like helping people. So the follow-up to that is, well, why don't you become a therapist, or why don't you become a physical therapist?
My answer is, why don't you become a plumber?
Yes, that's another one. Okay. So you really need to dig a little deeper and think about, well, what aspect of helping people do you want to be involved in? And one thing I suggest is thinking about the fact that medicine helps improve the quality of life of people, because you help them with their health care and with their well-being. And so that's a deeper way of saying you like to help people, but it's more specific to the career. So please never say, oh yeah, I like to help people.
Okay, got lots of good questions coming in, and two of them relate to how to answer, tell me about yourself. And let's see, Dr. Rothman, why don't you start this one?
Sure. Well, this one's going to show up early in an interview. It doesn't make sense for it to be the last question. So it's going to show up early. And the thing that you need to think about is, what do you want them to have as a take-home message about you? What are the things you want them to know about you? And those are the things you cover in Tell Me About Yourself. It's a really challenging question, but you should be prepared for it. And if you know the things that you want them to come away with, you can have those answers in a bunch of different responses to interview questions, even if you don't get the tell me something about yourself.
Okay, great. Here's a question from Rahul. Should you be prepared to answer questions related to current news? what are our opinions are related to COVID vaccine progression, etc. And actually, Flash, I'm sorry, did you have anything to add to the last question on tell me about yourself? I didn't ask you.
Oh, there are different,
I'm
so
sorry.
the interviewers may have different levels of access to your file. And so if it's a blind interview, they may be saying, tell me about yourself, just so, so they know where to start. You know, they're not given anything. Other times they are given the file, but they haven't really had a chance to get too much into it. So tell me about yourself is a way of them to connect with your file, right? And so they may have it in front of them and they're like, you know, turning the pages and say, oh yeah, they were just talking about that. Let's see what I can, there's something here I can ask them about, right? And it's not anything against you as an applicant. It's, you know, they're busy, they've got lots of applications going, and it's a way for them to kind of get into your space and to really focus on you. So it's a generous question. It's an opportunity for you to help shape the interview.
Okay, great. And now let's go to Rahul's question. And now, Dr. Gordon, could you start with it? And that is, should we be prepared to answer questions related to current news? What our opinions are, what our opinions are related to COVID vaccine progression, et cetera?
Absolutely. So I oftentimes recommend taking a look at the New England Journal of Medicine homepage. And there's all kinds of great stuff on there. There's perspectives, there's current news items. And the people who are interviewing you have probably been following the New England Journal of Medicine. And that's, you know, doctors talk to each other about what, you know, just came out in NEJM. And so I'd say prior to your interview, look at the last 2 or 3 issues and drill down on some of the topics. So just go down one level, you know, click on the news item and then take a look at the article and, you know, be informed. That shows that this is, you know, this is something that's important to you. You know, you want to be part of the profession. And so you are informed about current issues. That's why they're asking the question.
Okay. Thank you very much for that one. Dr. Rothman, do you have anything to add in terms of current
Yes,
news?
I would expand a little bit and say, read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and get another sense of what, you know, the regular people are reading, not just specialists in medicine. You're a citizen of the world, not just your profession. And so show that you actually have interest in what's going on around you and that you have a social conscience.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is, how can you make this, from an anonymous attendee, how can you make the interview more conversational than strictly interview style? Dr. Rothman, why don't you start with that one? And is that even necessary?
That's a very interesting question. And I think you have to read your interviewer. Some interviewers can be very stiff. Some are even like blank stares. And so that's a very difficult interview. But if the interviewer is giving you some hints that they're actually interested in having a more relaxed interview and you follow suit, then that can become conversational. And I think in some ways those are really informative interviews because you're relaxed, the interviewer's relaxed, you really get to know each other. But take the cue from the interviewer, because an interviewer might be turned off if you start getting casual with them and they're not being casual.
Okay, great. Dr. Gordon?
We could have a whole webinar about bad interviews. But there are some interviewers who have a slate of questions that they want to get through. They just want a whole bunch of quick answers to it. And I think it's unfortunate when that happens, but that's what they want from you, and you're just going to have to play along.
Okay. One question that came to mind as a result of your comment is what makes a bad interview? Dr. Gordon?
So it's more bad interviewer.
Okay, then they don't have any control over that.
Right. And there are different types of bad interviewers. So one is somebody who never gets to the point. So, they start out, oh, what's your favorite sports team? And, and it's just, so they're being conversational, they're being friendly, but at the end of the day, they're not going to have anything to send back to the admissions committee other than, it's like, well, Jody was a nice person and she's into hockey. That doesn't help the admissions committee. And so you need to, if that happens to you, then you need to guide that interviewer back to the topic. And so, you go along with it for a little while and you say, well, can I tell you why I'm interested in your school, right?
Okay, great idea. Great tip. Thank you. Dr. Rothman, you want to add anything? What makes a bad interview?
Well, I'd like to back up what Flash said. And the worst answers are these rambling long stories. Nobody wants to hear your long story in an interview, and you never get to the point. And so something Flash pointed out much earlier is if you have a structured answer where, especially if it's a complex answer, such as, what's been your research experience? Well, you don't start with research experience number one and start talking about it. You say, I've had 3 major research experiences at such and such, such and such, and such and such a place. And these are what I did in each of those places. And then maybe drill down into details. Remember, you could get cut off at any moment. And so you have to be prepared to give the most important information right up front. And rambling answers are awful. And it's a really way to shoot yourself in the foot is to just give long stories.
All right. Amber's asking, can you answer questions with scenarios or reasons used in secondaries and your personal statement? Dr. Rothman, you want to start this one?
Yeah. Examples are very powerful. So in a way, a scenario is like that. Examples from your life are very good as long as you state the principle that you're trying to cite. But yes, examples are good. Taking information from your application is fine. Don't just think, oh, I can't talk about that because it's in my application. Most likely your interviewer will not have read your application all that carefully. And so getting to information that's in there is fine and illuminating.
Dr. Gordon, you have anything to add?
So yeah, I think that's a very important point that your interviewer probably has not read your application or has not read it all. So in that sense, it's important for you to start from the beginning and to give a full answer. It can also happen that your interviewer has read your application and they're just checking to see that you've got the same answer. Right? And so I think in either way, yeah, it's fine to use what you put into your application. It's now in a verbal format, it's conversational. But yeah, just go with it. Don't hold back, right? Because it was in your application.
Presumably you put your best stories and examples in the application. So, okay. Here, we've got more questions here. This one's from Abby. The question is, what can you do in an interview to stand out from other equally qualified candidates? Now that's from Abby. My question is, should that be a goal of an interviewee? Even, anyway, Dr. Gordon, you finished up the last one, so you're gonna start this one.
Right, so I totally agree with you. That's not the goal.
Okay.
If you're trying to stand out, you're probably losing the battle right there. So, like, what are you going to do? Say something outrageous? Or I think candidates stand out by what they've done, and you can't change that. The other way candidates stand out is by being genuine, by being relatable. And so it's not the content per se. I would say it's, okay, so let me step back. So it's the exceptional candidate for whom the content makes them stand out. And then for the rest of us, it's that you're relatable, that you're a normal person, that you're somebody who they think will be a good doctor.
Okay. Dr. Rothman?
Actually, a very common interview question is, well, why should we accept you with so many equally qualified applicants? And, you know, it's an invitation. You could think of it as an invitation to compete with all the other applicants, which is bad news. You do not want to do that. You don't want to be a competitive person. So all you want to do is point out the most unusual aspects of you, or the most unique aspects of you as an applicant. The young woman that we interviewed, she speaks 5 languages. Not every medical school applicant speaks 5 languages, very few. So you might start out with your answer saying, well, one thing unusual about me is I speak 5 languages, and I can list those languages, and they've really helped me establish a very good sense of cultural competence. So that's something unique to that applicant, and I think that's what they want to see, rather than getting competitive.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Let's see. Okay, this is a really important question from an anonymous attendee. You think we still have chances for getting interviews for this cycle? I only have one so far. Dr. Rothman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Gordon.
Wait, it's early.
Congratulations that you already have one.
Yeah, congratulations. Exactly. I think
So,
there's beginning. Okay. I think that some of the schools are actually delaying extending interview invitations because of COVID. Gentlemen?
yeah, I mean, if you've got one, I would practice a lot for it. It might be the only one. You might get others. It's really hard to know what the process is going to be like. It is whimsical. It doesn't always make logical sense. So the school that interviews you and the school that doesn't interview you, you can't think your way through that because there's a lot of noise in the process. So go for what you have. You got an interview in hand. Go for it and hope to get some more.
And remember that the timing of the interview invitation means nothing. Yeah, you could get an interview invitation early on. You can get an interview invitation late. It doesn't mean anything really about the likelihood of acceptance.
Right. There can be some
don't worry about that.
invitations even out to the end of February. So there's still a long time ahead in which to receive invites.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that date gets pushed a little bit later, even because of COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You know, tell you what, we'll take one more question. Let's see. Okay, here's a good question. Just got posted. For reapplicants, what is best to do to show that I have grown from last cycle? Why, although I was denied last cycle, that I should be accepted this cycle? Also, as a reapplicant, will that be a glaring hindrance against me during the interview and the application process? And I think, let's see, I'm trying to remember who did the last. Dr. Rothman, I think you were the last, you ended the last question, so I'm going to start with you on this one. Okay?
Yes. First of all, it's an excellent question. The most important thing is to be able to say why you didn't get accepted the last time, and then to show that you've addressed those issues. So let's say you didn't have enough clinical experience. So own that. Say, yeah, I didn't have enough clinical experience. I should have waited. But now that I've waited 2 cycles, I've accumulated an extra 552 hours of clinical experience. And I feel that I've very well addressed that deficiency in my application. I'm ready to start medical school.
Dr. Gordon, do you have anything to add?
So you can reflect and realize for yourself what was deficient in your previous application, but it's also really useful to ask the admissions offices of schools where you interviewed and were rejected to have some feedback. They won't always give you that feedback, but enough schools will give you that feedback. They provide the feedback so that you can groom yourself, address it, and then come back.
And actually, we at Accepted offer a rejection review package for those who've been rejected.
Right. So that's another option, but hopefully the people here are going to get accepted. They're going to get interview invitations. They're going to do well in their interviews, and they're going to get accepted, so they don't need the rejection review package. But if they do need it, it's there for you. Okay. Now we're just at 6:01 now, and I want to thank Dr. Rothman and Dr. Gordon. I want to thank our attendees for their participation and their questions. And I also have a question for you before we go. I think you've stayed for the whole webinar, which is great. Thank you again. And we're getting thank yous from, well, Shivani for one person. My other question for you, though, is for those of you who are not yet clients at Accepted, clearly you're interested in what we have to say. And I'm wondering if any of you are on the fence about engaging Accepted for your interview prep, given its importance and given the excellent the expertise that you've seen here today. What's causing you to hesitate? And you can post your responses in the chat window, please. You're very welcome for those of you who are saying thank you. We're getting a lot of thank yous. Cost. Okay. Cost and time. Cost, unfortunately. Cost. I think I'm hearing I'm getting a pattern here. Okay. Cost. Thank you so much. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. All right, let's address the cost issues. When you get, I'm going to address it, and then I'd like you gentlemen to add your thoughts or correct me if you think I'm off base. How much does applying to medical school cost? About every application that you send in is about $150 with the primary and the secondary. And then if you have to retake the MCAT, that's probably, it's going to add another, at least the test fee and possibly more if you apply for you're very welcome, if you apply for a course. So the cost of reapplying is significant. That's the out-of-pocket cost. There's also the lost opportunity cost, in that if you start medical school a year earlier, then you get the doctor's salary of a year additional in terms of your lifetime. So when you're looking at the cost of a mock interview or a gold mock interview package, realize that it's much less expensive than potentially getting rejected. Much, much less expensive. So the cost is real. We have given you, again, there's a coupon, $100 off the gold mock interview package, and I'll post it again for you. The coupon code is Get Accepted. The page where you can use it is there, and so take advantage of it. It's good through the 22nd. And then time. I didn't quite understand the time one. What did you mean by time? And Dr. Rothman, Dr. Gordon, while we're figuring out what time means, would you have anything to add to the cost argument?
Yes. God, I just lost my train of thought. So Flash, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. This year, the cost of interviews is way down because you don't have to fly. You don't have to stay in a hotel. So the cost of a gold package is probably one trip out for an interview. And so reinvest that money in getting really well prepared for these, for the video format.
I remember what I was going to say now. Also, this is a time to hit up your relatives and see if they are willing to help you with the cost, because you could offer them medical care for a chunk of their lifetime if you're a successful medical school applicant. So in a way, it's a family's investment. It's not just your own investment. and enticing relatives or just asking them, can you help me? And I really need extra money to complete this process. It's certainly worth a try.
Okay. Now, Zach, you mentioned time. I wasn't quite sure what you meant by time. Could you add that to the chat window? Time between classes, full-time work, and volunteering and sleep for the non-traditional student. Again, the mock interview is roughly 1 hour. The mock gold interview package is roughly 3 hours, roughly. I sympathize that you're very, very busy. That's really clear. And I know it's much easier for me to say than for you to do. So I don't want to come off as being unsympathetic or glib. But all the time that you're investing in your medical school application process, and you're so close, it would seem to me that, maybe you take off a couple of hours work or an hour. Yeah, obviously you're going to make time for the interview. So just a thought on the time part of it. Dr. Gordon, Dr. Rothman, do you have anything to add?
Also, I schedule a lot of my interview practices on the weekend. I find people are, they're away from work and school, and they're sort of more able to really get their head in the zone for the interviews. And I'm perfectly happy figuring out weekend times to do that.
Okay. Dr. Rothman, you have anything to add?
Well, Zach, it sounds like your schedule's pretty intense.
Yes, it does.
Made me feel tired just listening to it. And I'm wondering if maybe you're doing yourself a disservice by having such a packed schedule, and whether that's making your quality of life right now not as high as it could be. And again, it's very important to prepare for a stressful career, and part of that is learning how to balance your time and your life, and to make sure there's enough free time so that you can get to relax and connect with people.
For those of you who choose not to invest in the mock interview, I do want to share this. This is a free resource that we have in addition to this webinar that you can use. We do want to help you get in, so go for it. But any other reasons, any other factors stopping people from going for the mock interview? Cost, yeah. Again, you're spending so much money on the application. You're so close when you get invited to interview. The cost of not getting accepted, and also the chances of acceptance, go up dramatically when you're invited to interview. I'll go back to the metaphor I used before. Would you perform without a rehearsal? Would you play sports without practice? Go to the World Series without practice? I doubt it. You're very welcome. You're very welcome, Zach. And with that, again, I suggested the free resource. We have $100 off our gold mock interview package, which is an iterative process that allows you to see improvement and get feedback. And however you proceed, I want to thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Dr. Rothman. Thank you, Dr. Gordon. And I want to wish all the applicants best of luck with their interviews and with the whole entire med school application process. Take care. Have a good evening. Again, lots of thank yous coming in to you, and I want to share that with you. Okay. Take care.